How do you know when it's time to change or quit doing a program? When is it time to change up the way that you do youth group, camp, mission trips, or even VBS? On this quick hit episode of Student Ministry Connection, I'll share how I evaluate my ministry programs and share some of the ways that I go about modifying or letting them go when it's time to change it up. Welcome to Student Ministry Connection, a podcast for those who serve in student ministry but also want to connect with others and grow as disciples and leaders. My name is Steve Cullum, and I've served in student ministry since 1999. And in addition to serving as a youth pastor myself, I'm also a missionary with National Network of Youth Ministries, where I get to personally encourage, professionally equip, and spiritually strengthen youth leaders for faithful and effective ministry with the next generation. In my experience within student ministry, there's a lot of times where we find ourselves in a place where we have a program that's really not going like we thought it would. Or maybe after some time, it's just not performing like it once did. Maybe there's less people coming, or no one's excited like they once were, or it's just not fulfilling the vision that you had for it. So what do? How do we know when it's time to change it up or even kill a specific program? I think it all comes down to proper evaluation. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about on this episode of the podcast. But before we jump into that, let's pause and thank the sponsor of this episode. Ministry can be complicated to navigate, especially when you're juggling multiple jobs, roles, or youth ministry gatherings. Student Ministry Connection believes that the best leaders are healthy leaders, leaders who are able to lead from a place of abundance rather than exhaustion. And that's why we believe in G-Shades Youth Ministry Curriculum. With the release of Season 6, G-Shades is your simple solution for a gospel-centered youth ministry. Here's what's included. You can simplify your ministry with a comprehensive annual teaching curriculum and ministry strategy. Season 6 includes a year's worth of volunteer training resources, parent training resources, outreach events, discipleship events, and even 2 camps. You can clarify your students' faith with G-Shade's gospel-centered teaching strategy. Their curriculum is laser-focused on helping students see themselves, God, and others through the lens of the gospel. And it shows up in every topic, series, and week. And you can amplify your reach with G-Shade's qualitative and engaging video messages. Whether it's sharing the videos with your digital audience, giving parents a full preview of the content beforehand, or sending them out the next day to catch students up who missed out. G-Shades allows you to extend your ministry's reach, and that's not to mention the benefits of your students hearing the gospel preached from different voices and perspectives. There are lots of great youth ministry curriculums out there, but G-Shades sets itself apart because of a strong focus on the gospel. I've been so impressed with Mike and his team as they've created an amazing gospel-centered curriculum. So head over to gshades.org to catch your first glimpse of G-Shades Season 6 with a 4-week free trial. And when it's time to buy, you can use the offer code CONNECTION for 10% off their top-tier curriculum. G-Shades, seeing life through the lens of the gospel. You can find the link to G-Shades in our podcast show notes. Before I jump into details, you need to know something about me. As a stereotypical perfectionist, evaluation is not only something that comes very natural to me, but it's often something I cannot turn off. I'm constantly critiquing myself and the things that I'm leading. Some of you are probably the same, and others have no idea what I'm talking about. If for the former, I do encourage you to keep listening, as you might pick up on some ways to direct your natural evaluating brain. But for others, I'm hoping you pick up some tips on how to add a layer of evaluation into your ministry. One of the best pieces of advice that I received early in my ministry was not to change anything significant within the first year of your new ministry position. And I know that's really hard for some of you. You might be stepping into a situation where you really want to change things. But as much as you can, resist that temptation. And instead, take some time to get to know people. Take a lot of notes and have a lot of conversations. You may be evaluating things the whole way through, but resist that urge to change things because people are naturally resistant to change. And you want to get to know people and build those relationships rather than just coming in like a bulldozer and changing all these different programs your first day on the job or even your first couple months on the job. But after you've been there for a while, it's time to start evaluating. And my first tip is to not evaluate in a vacuum. Invite a trusted team into that process. If you're married, that can be your spouse. But I also encourage you to invite your volunteers. If you have a large team, maybe just choose a handful of your most committed leaders. This should also include your supervisor to some extent. And if you have a mentor or coach, invite them into that process as well. I'd also encourage you to talk to a few parents, especially those parents that are really invested. And also, if you have a student leadership team, which I encourage you to do, bring those students into the conversation as well. I think that's a thing that a lot of youth pastors and youth leaders will overlook is including students into the conversation. And I think that's something we really need to do more of is include them on the things that we're creating for them. But once you've thought about all the people that you want to include in regular evaluation, now it's time to think about the program or event or whatever it is itself. What is the purpose of that event or program? What's the vision behind it? What are the goals for that specific program? And how is it connected to your overall mission? That's going to be very, very important as you evaluate. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, then you're not really going to have a good evaluation. You need to know why you're doing it, not just because it's always been done or anything like that. And maybe if you're doing some things that don't actually have a vision or a purpose, maybe that's what you need to evaluate itself. But after you've thought about the vision and the purpose and the goals and the mission of that event or program, now it's time to think about how you actually evaluate. I think weekly programs need weekly evaluation, and annual programs need annual evaluation. In other words, if you do something on a regular basis, regularly evaluate it. But if you do something on a once in a while basis, evaluate it every once in a while. We're going to get into some ways that you can regularly evaluate, but I think it's always important for us to be asking questions. For instance, is this the best day of the week for our weekly program? At a previous ministry, we moved our programs a couple different times. When I first arrived at this church, they were on Sunday mornings, and I really didn't think that was the best date for it. We eventually moved it to Sunday nights. And I always, in the back of my mind, wanted to move it to Wednesday because I really like the idea of a Wednesday night program. But every year, I asked my students, my parents, my team, would Wednesday night work out for you if we moved our program to Wednesday nights? And overwhelmingly, I got no. They said, Steve, we like the idea of Wednesday. We're totally behind the thought. But honestly, we can't make Wednesday night work. And I knew from my research and from asking regular questions that if we moved our program from Sunday night, which was thriving, to Wednesday night, I knew that I would lose probably half of my students that were already regularly attending, including most of our high school students. I also knew that a lot of our students told us that their friends couldn't make Wednesday nights happen either. And so invitations would also go down. And I would probably lose at least 2/3 of my regular team who were very committed and loved the ministry. So we kept it on Sunday nights. Unfortunately, after I left, the next leadership made some changes and moved it to Wednesday nights. And all those things happened. The ministry took kind of a nosedive. Please don't hear me say that I was perfect and had everything figured out. That's not the case. But in this particular instance, I had done the research. I had asked those questions, and I knew what would happen if we were to move the ministry from Sunday nights to Wednesday nights. I knew that all these people would not be able to be a part of it anymore, and it would suffer because of it. So in summary, we need to make sure that we're always asking really good questions. And if we do need to make some changes, we'll know how it's going to play out based on those questions and that research. We may have some really good ideas, but if it's not going to match with our community and our culture, maybe we don't do it. So now it comes to the actual evaluation of a program. Some questions we need to ask at the very beginning is it not accomplishing our goals anymore? And if not, why not? Go back to that mission and that vision, those goals that you have for your event or your program. Is the event not actually accomplishing that anymore? And figure out why it's not. And then the second question to ask is, can we change it and begin to accomplish those goals. So instead of completely obliterating it and going in a completely different direction, can we make some tweaks that can get us back to accomplishing those goals? And then third, is there another thing that we can do and accomplish those goals even better? Maybe you can make some tweaks and improve, but is there something else that we can do that can accomplish those goals far greater than this current event or program? Those are some questions to constantly be asking. And as you evaluate your weekly programs, it's important to bring people into those conversations as well. Hey, did we accomplish our goals for this night? Did we do everything the best we can? And what can we learn from this for next week? But when we step back and think about the entire program or the entire event, there are several different analyses that we can use to run our programs, our ministries, and our events through. One's called a SWOT analysis. That's where you evaluate your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Another one is a right, wrong, missing, and confused analysis. And in fact, there's a lot of different analyses that are out there that you can also use. The big thing is just use one. Pick whatever works best for you. And what I love to do is I get those people in a room that we talked about earlier, those people that are going to be on my team of analysis, and we talk through all these different things. So if we're using the SWOT, list all the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats, usually on a whiteboard. Or if we list all the right things about it, the wrong things about it, the things that are missing, and the things that are confused about the program, event, or ministry. Another thing I'll interject real quick is to make sure you do this soon after the event or program. Because a lot of times, if we take some time between when an event ended and when we evaluate it, we're not going to have those things as fresh as they were in our minds when we were actually there. So I really like evaluating our regular ministry within a day or so of the weekly program. But something like a VBS or a camp or a mission trip, I usually like evaluating that within the first week. Maybe you're going to take a couple days to rest, but right after you get back into the office, start the evaluation process. And then after we evaluate it in that way, we step back and we look at the overall picture. And if we have a lot of things that are wrong or a lot of things that are weak about it or a lot of threats or a lot of things that are confused, what we can actually do about that? So we start to analyze those things and it starts to create what we're going to do moving forward and gives us our marching orders. And that's what we have to do as leaders is we look at that analysis and we go, okay, what am I going to do about this? And as you're evaluating, if you come to the point where you decide, yeah, it's time to change it up, or in fact, maybe you come to the point where you think it's time to kill this program or this ministry or this event, I have some recommendations for you. First of all, do a lot of research first. Don't just look at your whiteboard and you see, oh man, there's a lot of things wrong with it. We need completely to change it and just run. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, I urge you to take a breath, think about it, pray like crazy, of course, throughout this entire thing. I think that's a given. I'm hoping you're praying through this entire evaluation process. But don't just make rash decisions. Talk about it. Do a lot of research. What is the best decision? What is the best direction for this? But let's say it is time to change things up and you've got a pretty good idea now of how to change it. You've talked to your mentors, you've talked to each other, you've talked to your team, you've prayed like crazy, you've done a lot of research and you've read a lot of blogs, you've listened to a lot of podcasts, and you know the direction that you're supposed to go. Make sure your team is on board with those details and how to support that change. Because if you're running this alone, it's going to be a long road uphill. But if you have a team of people that are supporting you around it, it's going to make a world of a difference as you lead change within your ministry. We all need to realize and remember that there are different types of reactions to change. Some are going to completely reject it. They're just adverse to change or this particular change, and you just know people are going to react in that way. Some are going to be early adopters, and they're going to hear just a portion of your vision and where you're going, and they're going to jump on board and want to run. And then others are going to need a little more help to eventually jump on. So, who are in your audience, and how are you going to lead each group accordingly? And finally, if it is time to kill a program or a ministry or an event, this might sound weird, but consider actually having a funeral for it. Early on in my ministry, when I was an intern, we killed a specific program in our ministry, and it was hard on a lot of students. So we had a funeral, and we helped the students to mourn its loss. We talked about all the great things, but we also helped them get excited about the next thing and the reason why we let this particular program or this particular event die in order to do something far greater that's actually going to accomplish our visions and our mission and our goals behind this particular event. Overall, change is difficult, but if we're properly evaluating and analyzing our ministries, our events, and our programs, we're going to be able to lead into that change when it's time the right way and be able to lead our students and our families and our teams and our church and hopefully our community to something better that will actually accomplish what God has in front of us. And that brings us to the end of this episode. I hope it was helpful for you. If you have any follow-up questions or want to talk about how best to evaluate your ministry, please reach out. I would love to have those conversations. And I'd love to also connect you with other youth leaders in your area. I think that's one of the amazing things about a local network is having those people around you that you can bounce ideas off of on a regular basis. And so if you're not connected to a local network, please reach out and connect with us. Speaking of which, if you'd like to support my ministry with National Network of Youth Ministries, you can become a financial partner and a prayer partner. Just head over to nnym.org/Steve Cullum or follow the link in the podcast show notes. And before we wrap up, I just want to remind you of a couple things. First of all, GLS Next Gen is August 8th and 9th, 2024. We'd love to see you a part of that. Please follow the link in the show notes and you can save a bunch of money on your ticket. And also, if you know other people that are not a Next Gen leader, but also just want to attend GLS at a cheaper rate, they can also still use that link and that code. Also, we're doing this big prayer push with NNYM August 12th through the 16th. It's going to be a huge prayer initiative for all the school campuses and juvenile detention centers across the country. You can find out more about the ways that you can participate in the link in the show notes. And we also want to thank G-Shades for sponsoring this episode. Head over to gshades.org to check out the latest season of their curriculum and be sure to use that promo code CONNECTION for 10% off your order. And thanks again for being here for this episode. If you haven't yet subscribed, be sure to do that on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube and share this with others in student ministry so you don't miss out on future episodes. Until next time, be sure to stay connected and God bless your ministry.